Okay, chapter 5, letter from a pre-med. To which Newt replied, "I'm sorry to be so long about answering your letter. Sounds like a very interesting book you are doing. I was so young when the bomb was dropped that I don't think I'm going to be much help. You should really ask my brother and sister who are both older than I am. My sister is Mrs. Harrison C. Corners, 4918 North Meridian Street, Indianapolis, Indiana. That is my home address too now. I think she will be glad to help you. Nobody knows where my brother Frank is. He disappeared right after father's funeral 2 years ago. Nobody has heard from him since. For all we know, he may be dead now. I was only 6 years old when they dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, so anything I remember about that day, other people have helped me to remember. I remember I was playing on the living room carpet outside my father's study door in Ilium, New York. The door was open, and I could see my father. He was wearing pajamas and a bathrobe. He was smoking a cigar. He was playing with a loop of string. Father was staying home from the laboratory in his pajamas all day that day. He stayed home whenever he wanted to. Father, as you probably know, spent practically his whole professional life working for the research laboratory of the General Forge and Foundry Company in Ilium. When the Manhattan Project came along, the bomb project, Father wouldn't leave Ilium to work on it. He said he wouldn't work on it at all unless they let him work where he wanted to work. A lot of the time that meant at home. The only place he liked to go outside of Ilium was their cottage on Cape Cod. Cape Cod is where he died. He died on a Christmas Eve. You probably know that too. Anyway, I was playing on the carpet outside his study on the day of the bomb. My sister Angela tells me I used to play with the little toy trucks for hours, making motor sounds, going Burton, Burton, Burton all the time. So I guess I was going Burton, Burton, Burton on the day of the bomb, and Father was in his study playing with a loop of string. It so happens I know where the string he was playing with came from. Maybe you can use it somewhere in your book. Father took the string from around the manuscript of a novel that a man in prison had sent him. The novel was about the end of the world in the year 2000, and the name of the book was 2000 AD. It told about how mad scientists made a terrific bomb that wiped out the whole world. There was a big sex orgy when everybody knew that the... This is crazy. Alright, so... when the world was going to end, and then Jesus Christ himself appeared 10 seconds before the bomb went off. The name of the author was Marvin Sharp Holderness, and he told Father in a covering letter that he was in prison for killing his own brother. He sent the manuscript to Father because he couldn't figure out what kind of explosive to put the bomb in. He thought maybe Father could make suggestions. I don't mean to tell you I read the book when I was 6. We had it around the house for years. My brother Frank made it his personal property on account of the dirty parts. Frank kept it hidden in what he called his wall safe in his bedroom. Actually, it wasn't a safe, but just an old stove flue with a tin lid. Frank and I must have read the orgy part 1,000 times when we were kids. We had it for years, and my sister Angela found it. She read it and said it was nothing but a piece of dirty, rotten filth. She burned it up and the string with it. She was a mother to Frank and me because our real mother died when I was born. My father never read the book, I'm pretty sure. I don't think he ever read a novel or even a short story in his whole life, or at least not since he was a little boy. He didn't read his mail or magazines or newspapers either. I suppose he read a lot of technical journals, but to tell you the truth, I can't remember my father reading anything. As I say, all he wanted from the manuscript was a string. It was the way he was. Nobody could predict what he was going to be interested in next. On the day of the bomb, it was string. Have you ever read the speech he made when he accepted the Nobel Prize? This is the whole speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you now because I never stopped dawdling like an 8-year-old on a spring morning on his way to school. Anything can make me stop and look and wonder, sometimes learn. I'm a very happy man, thank you. Anyway, Father looked at the loop of string for a while, and then his fingers started playing with it. His fingers made the string figure called a cat's cradle. I don't know where Father learned how to do that. From his father, maybe? His father was a tailor, you know, so there must have been thread and string around all the time when Father was a boy. Making that cat's cradle was the closest I ever saw my father come into play what anybody else would call a game. He had no use at all for tricks and games and rules that other people made up. In a scrapbook my sister Angela used to keep up, there was a clipping from Time magazine where somebody asked Father what games he played for relaxation, and he said, "Why should I bother with made-up games when there are so many real ones going on?" He must have surprised someone when he made a cat's cradle out of the string, and maybe it reminded him of his own childhood. He all of a sudden came out of his study and did something he'd never done before. He tried to play with me. Not only had he never played with me before, he had hardly ever spoken to me. It's fucked up. But he went down on his knees on the carpet next to me and he showed me his teeth and he waved that tangle of string in my face. See, he asked, "Cat's cradle. See the cat's cradle? See where the nice pussy cat sleeps? Meow, meow." His pores looked as big as craters on the moon. His ears and nostrils were stuffed with hair. Cigar smoke made him smell like the mouth of hell. So close up, my father was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. I dream about it all the time. And then he sang, "Rock-a-bye Catsy" and treetop. He sang, "When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. If the bow breaks, the cradle will fall. Down will come cradle, Catsy and all." I burst into tears. I jumped up and I ran out of the house as fast as I could go. I have no sign off here. It's after 2 in the morning. Or I have to sign off here. It's 2 in the morning. My roommate just woke up and complained about the noise from the typewriter. I guess I'll keep going. Number 6, bug fights. Newt resumed his letter the next morning. He resumed it as follows. "Next morning, here I go again, fresh as a daisy after 8 hours of sleep. The fraternity house is very quiet now. Everybody's in class but me. I'm a very privileged character. I don't have to go to class anymore. I was flunked out last week. I was a pre-med. They were right to flunk me out. I would have made a lousy doctor. After I finish this letter, I think I'll go to a movie, or if the sun comes out, maybe I'll go for a walk through one of the gorges. Aren't the gorges beautiful? This year, 2 girls jumped into one holding hands. They didn't get into the sorority they wanted. They wanted to try Dell. But back to August 6, 1945. My sister Angela had told me many times that it really hurt my father that day when I wouldn't admire the cat's cradle, when I wouldn't stay there on the carpet with my father and listen to him sing. Maybe I did hurt him, but I don't think I could have hurt him much. He was one of the best protected human beings who ever lived. People couldn't get at him because he just wasn't interested in... He wasn't interested in people. I remember one time about a year before he died, I tried to get him to tell me something about my mother. He couldn't remember anything about her. Did you ever hear the famous story about breakfast on the day Mother and Father were leaving for Sweden to accept the Nobel Prize? It was in the Saturday Evening Post one time. Mother cooked a big breakfast, and then when she cleared off the table, she found a quarter and a dime, 3 pennies by Father's cup of coffee. He'd tipped her. After wounding my father so terribly, if that's what I did, I ran out into the yard. I didn't know where I was going until I found my brother Frank under a big spirea bush. Frank was 12 then, and I wasn't surprised to find him under there. He spent a lot of time under there on hot days. Just like a dog, he'd make a hollow in the cool earth all around the roots. You never could tell what Frank would have under the bush with him. One time he had a dirty book. Another time he had a bottle of cooking sherry. On the day they dropped the bomb, Frank had a tablespoon in a mason jar. What he was doing was spooning different kinds of bugs into the jar and making them fight. The bug fight was so interesting that I stopped crying right away. Forgot all about the old man. I couldn't remember all Frank had fighting in the jar that day, but I can remember other bug fights we staged later on. 1 stag beetle against 100 red ants, 1 centipede against 3 spiders, red ants against black ants. They won't fight unless you keep shaking the jar. That's what Frank was doing, shaking the jar. After a while, Angela came looking for me. She lifted up one side of the bush and she said, "So there you are." She asked Frank what he thought he was doing, and he said, "Experimenting." That's what Frank always used to say when people asked him what he thought he was doing. He always said, "Experimenting." Angela was 22 then. She had been the real head of the family since she was 16, since Mother died, since I was born. She used to talk about she had 3 children, me, Frank, and Father. She wasn't exaggerating either. I can remember cold mornings when Frank, Father, and I would be all in line in front of the hall, and Angela would be bundling us up, treating us exactly the same, only I was going to kindergarten, Frank was going to junior high, and Father was going to work on the atom bomb. I remember one morning like that when the oil burner had quit, the pipes were frozen, and the car wouldn't start. We all sat there in the car while Angela kept pushing the starter until the battery was dead, and then Father spoke up. You know what he said? He said, I wonder about turtles. What do you wonder about turtles? Angela asked him. When they pull on their heads, he said, do their spines buckle or contract? Angela was one of the unsung heroines of the atom bomb. Incidentally, and I don't think the story has ever been told. Maybe you can use it. Alright. After the turtle incident, Father got so interested in his turtles that he stopped working on the atom bomb. Some people from Manhattan Project finally came out to the house to ask Angela what to do. She told him to take away Father's turtles, so one night they went into his laboratory and stole the turtles in the aquarium. Father never said a word about the disappearance of the turtles. He just came to work the next day and looked for things to play with and think about, and everything there was to play with and think about had something to do with the bomb. When Angela got me out from under the bush, she asked me about what happened between Father and me. I just kept saying over and over again how ugly he was, how much I hated him, so she slapped me. How dare you say that about our father? She said, he's one of the greatest men who ever lived. He won the war today. Do you realize that? He won the war. She slapped me again. I don't blame Angela for slapping me. Father was all she had. She didn't have any boyfriends. She didn't have any friends at all. She only had one hobby. She played the clarinet. I told her again how much I hated my father. She slapped me again, and then Frank came out from under the bush and punched her in the stomach. It hurt her something awful. She fell down and she rolled. When she got her wind back, she cried and yelled for Father. He won't come, Frank said, and he laughed at her. Frank was right. Father stuck his head out a window and he looked at Angela and me rolling on the ground, bawling, and Frank standing over us, laughing. The old man pulled his head indoors again and never even asked later what all the fuss had been about. People weren't his specialty. Will that do? Is that any help to your book? Of course. You really tied me down, asking me to stick to the day of the bomb. There are lots of other good anecdotes about the bomb and Father from other days. For instance, do you know the story about Father on the day they first tested a bomb out at Alamogordo? After the thing went off, after it was a sure thing that America could wipe out a city with just one bomb, a scientist turned to Father and said, science has now known sin. Well, after the thing went off, after it was a sure thing that America could wipe out a city with just one bomb, a scientist turned to Father and said, science has now known sin. And do you know what Father said? He said, what is sin? All the best, Newton Honecker. Oh, shit. So, alright, chapter 7, which is only one page. Newt added these 3 postscripts to his letter. So the same guy's still writing. P.S. I can't sign myself fraternally yours because they won't let me be your brother on account of my grades. I was only a pledge and now they are going to take even that away from me. P.P.S. You call our family illustrious and I think you would maybe be making a mistake if you called it that in your book. I am a midget, for instance, 4 feet tall. And the last we heard of my brother Frank, he was wanted by the Florida police, the FBI, and the Treasury Department for running stolen cars to Cuba on war surplus LSTs. So I'm pretty sure illustrious isn't quite the word you're after. Glamorous is probably closer to the truth. P.P.P.S. 24 hours later, I have reread this letter and I can see where somebody might get the impression that I don't do anything but sit around and remember sad things and pity myself. Actually, I'm a very lucky person and I know it. I'm about to marry a wonderful little girl. There's love enough in this world for everybody. People will just look. I am proof of that. It's crazy. It's a crazy book. Alright, Newt's thing was Zinka. Newt did not tell me who his girlfriend was. But about 2 weeks after he wrote to me, everybody in the country knew that her name was Zinka. Plain Zinka. Apparently she didn't have a last name. Zinka was a Ukrainian midget, a dancer with the bourgeois dance company, Borzoi, B-O-R-Z-O-I. As it happened, Newt saw a performance by that company in Indianapolis before he went to Cornell. And then the company danced at Cornell. When the Cornell performance was over, little Newt was outside the stage door with a dozen long-stem American beauty roses. The newspapers picked up the story when little Zinka asked for political asylum in the United States, and then she and little Newt disappeared. 1 week after that, little Zinka presented herself at the Russian embassy. She said Americans were too materialistic. She said she wanted to go back home. Newt took shelter in his sister's house in Indianapolis. He gave one brief statement to the press. It was a private matter. He said it was an affair of the heart. I have no regrets. What happened is nobody's business but Zinka's and my own. So, I'm really not quite getting the drift of this story yet, but one enterprising American reporter in Moscow making inquiries about Zinka amongst dance people there made the unkind discovery that Zinka was not, as she claimed, only 23 years old. She was 42, old enough to be Newt's mother. So number 9, vice president in charge of volcanoes. I loafed on my book about the day of the bomb. About a year later, 2 days before Christmas, another story carried me through Ilium, New York, where Dr. Felix Honecker had done most of his work, where little Newt, Frank, and Angela had spent their formative years. I stopped off in Ilium to see what I could see. There were no live Honeckers left in Ilium, but there were plenty of people who claimed to have known Well, the old man, and his 3 peculiar children. I made an appointment with Dr. Asa Breed, vice president in charge of the research laboratory of General Forge and Foundry Company. I suppose Dr. Breed was a member of my Karas too, though he took a dislike to me almost immediately. Likes and dislikes have nothing to do with it, so says Bokanon, an easy warning to forget. Likes and dislikes have nothing to do with it, says Bokanon, an easy warning to forget. I understand you were Dr. Honecker's supervisor during most of his professional life, I said to Dr. Breed on the telephone. On paper, he said. I don't understand, I said. If I actually supervise Felix, he said, then I'm ready now to take charge of volcanoes, the tides, the migrations of birds and lemmings. The man was a force of nature no mortal could possibly control. Number 10, secret agent X9. Dr. Breed made an appointment with me for early the next morning. He would pick me up at my hotel on his way to work, he said, thus simplifying my entry into the heavily guarded research laboratory. So I had a night to kill in Ilium. I was already in the beginning and the end of nightlife in Ilium. The Del Prado Hotel. Its bar, the Cape Cod room, was hanging out for whores, as it happened, as it was meant to happen. Bakonin would say, the whore next to me at the bar and the bartender serving me had both gone to high school with Franklin Honecker, the bug tormentor, the middle child, the missing son. The whore, who said her name was Sandra, offered me delights unobtainable outside of Place Pigalle and Port said. I said I wasn't interested, and she was bright enough to say that she wasn't really interested either. As things turned out, we both had overestimated our apathies, but not by much. Before we took the measure of each other's passions, however, we talked about Frank Honecker, and we talked about the old man, and we talked a little about Asa Breed. And we talked about the General Forge and Foundry Company, and we talked about the Pope and birth control, about Hitler and Jews. We talked about phonies. We talked about truth, we talked about gangsters, we talked about business, we talked about the nice poor people who went to the electric chair. We talked about the rich bastards who didn't. We talked about religious people who had perversions. We talked about a lot of things. We got drunk. The bartender was very nice to Sandra. He liked her, he respected her. He told me that Sandra had been chairman of the class colors committee at Ilium High. Every class, he exclaimed, got to pick distinctive colors for itself its junior year, and then it got to wear those colors with pride. What colors did you pick, I asked. Orange and black. Those are good colors, I thought so. Was Franklin Honecker on the class colors committee too? He wasn't on anything, said Sandra scornfully. He never got on any committee. Never played any game, never took out any girl. I don't think he ever even talked to a girl. We used to call him Secret Agent X9. X9. You know, he was always acting like he was on his way between 2 secret places, could have never talked to anybody. Maybe he really did have a very rich secret life, I suggested. Nah, sneered the bartender. He was just one of those kids who made model airplanes and jerked off all the time. I'm reading it at a park, and my daughter's playing pretty far away over there. But there's a mother over there, mother and father. They're kind of watching her for me. 11, protein. He was supposed to be our commencement speaker, said Sandra. Who was, I asked. Dr. Honecker, the old man. What did he say? He didn't show up, so he didn't get any commencement address? Oh, we got one, Dr. Breed. The one you're going to see tomorrow? He showed up, all out of breath, and he gave some kind of talk. What did he say? He said he hoped a lot of us would have careers in science, she said. She didn't see anything funny in that. She was remembering a lesson that had impressed her. She was repeating it gropingly, dutifully. She said the trouble with the world was... She had to stop and think. The trouble with the world was, she continued hesitatingly, that people were still superstitious instead of scientific. He said if everybody would study science more, there wouldn't be all the trouble there was. He said science was going to discover the basic secret of life someday, the bartender put in. He scratched his head and frowned. Didn't I read in the paper the other day where they finally found out what it was? I missed that, I murmured. I saw that, said Sandra, about 2 days ago. That's right, said the bartender. What is the secret of life, I asked. I forget, said Sandra. Protein, the bartender declared. They found out something about protein. Yeah, said Sandra, that's it. Alright, so all these chapters are super small, bro. It's kind of like total opposite of, you don't like it ever too long, but you don't really want it to be annoyingly short. So for the sakes of elements still playing, I really have nothing to do. Pretty sure my kid's thirsty. Okay, the end of the world delight. Number 12, end of the world delight. An older bartender came over to join in our conversation in the Cape Cod room of the Del Prado. When he heard that I was writing a book about the day of the bomb, he told me what the day had been like for him, what the day had been like in the very bar in which he sat. He had a W.C. Phillips twang in a nose like a prize strawberry. It wasn't the Cape Cod room then, he said. We didn't have all these fugging nets and seashells around. It was called the Navajo teepee in those days. Had Indian blankets and cow skulls on the walls. Had little tom-toms on the table. People were supposed to be on the tom-toms when they wanted service. They tried to get me to wear a war bonnet, but I wouldn't do it. Real Navajo Indian came in here one day, told me Navajos didn't live in teepees. That's a fucking shame, I told him. Before that, it was a Pompeii room with busted plaster all over the place. But no matter what they call the room, they never change the fucking light fixtures. Never change the fucking people who come in or the fucking town outside either. The day they dropped Honecker's fucking bomb on the Japanese, a bum came in and tried to scrounge a drink. He wanted me to give him a drink on account of the world was coming to an end, so I mixed him an end of the world delight. I gave him about a half pint of cream de menthe and a hollowed out pineapple with whipped cream and a cherry on top. There, you pitiful son of a bitch, I said to him. Don't ever say I did anything for you. Another guy came in and he said he was quitting his job at the research laboratory. Said anything a scientist worked on was sure to wind up as a weapon one way or another. Said he didn't want to help politicians with their fucking wars anymore. Name was Breed. I asked him if he was any relation to the boss of the fucking research laboratory. He said he fucking well was. Said he was the boss of the research laboratory's fucking son. He was the boss of the research laboratory's fucking son. Okay, so this guy's trying to figure out, like, it's like he's getting the backstory of the man who made the bomb, pretty much. But it's supposed to be a satire. So I don't know. Anyway, y'all, peace.